We have arrived. This is Webb Parton, your host, and we welcome you to the Free Range Dogs podcast. This is a place where we stake out a shady spot and talk about all things dog. Find yourself a soft piece of grass, spin a few circles, plop down, rest your feet, and join us in this joyful conversation. Hi, this is Webb Parton with Free Range Dogs podcast, and we're going to be talking today to Dave Gowdey, a friend of many years. Dave, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Dave Gowdey. I'm an old Arizona quail hunter and a German Shorthair lover for 45 years now.
And you are the author of the book on German Shorthairs.
Well, yes, I wrote a book, The German Shorthaired Pointer, A Hunter's Guide, and it's been well received.
Yes, it has. Well, that would be very fortuitous because we are about to discuss your favorite subject, I'm going to guess, which would be German Shorthair pointers. On this podcast, we do cover different breeds of dogs, different interests of dogs, different types of training and such. German Shorthair is a very popular breed of dog, a very good hunting dog, and represented worldwide, really. You can see them just about everywhere. And so that's the first thing I wanted to cover, the thing that I was curious about, because I know you spent a lot of time overseas. You were with the State Department, and you were able to hunt in different countries and see dog breeds in different countries. And I'm presuming you have seen German Shorthairs in other parts of the world. Not as widely as I would like, but in Europe, in Southern Africa, and in South America. And were they the same dog that you see here?
For the most part, they were. The sizes vary, and the ones in South America were much smaller. But in general, they're the same dog.
I know that I will see, when I was training here, I would see the old blood German Shorthairs come through, a little bit stockier, more roan, a little bit heavier head shape, better ground nose, more reliable in terms of a singles dog as opposed to the American breeding, which would have a whole lot of white in it. Very athletic, almost like an English pointer, had been visiting the hen house. And I would see the comparisons. The American bred German Shorthairs, some of them, bred for field trial work, really ran way, way bigger than those old blood German Shorthairs that I saw. I'm presuming that you didn't see that overseas. You saw more of the more reliable, solid German Shorthair blood.
Yeah, the more of the German style breeding.
Yes.
And actually, one of the things that they use them overseas for more than we do is fur. German Shorthairs, for example, in Australia, are still heavily used for deer hunting. And they're still used for deer hunting in Germany as well. Whereas in the United States and in a lot of other places, they've become mostly bird dogs. So,
and how does that work? They use them for blood trailing or for running deer?
Yes, both actually. Blood trailing once the deer has been hit, and trailing when they're trying to find or find deer, or work up deer, I guess, get them out of cover. So,
I've owned Shorthairs, and I've trained a lot over the years, and I've always been impressed with how effective they are at locating downed. My case would be birds, but you got a Shorthair on the job, and they generally come up with something. I've watched them, go to a pack rat midden in the middle of the desert after a quail had run off, and they dig for 3 minutes, and they come up with a bird in their mouth. So it is impressive.
Yeah, it is impressive. I've actually had, I think we've all had those experiences where I was swinging on a Mearns quail and got more tree than quail. Didn't think I hit anything, and had my little Rosie go out. 10 minutes later, she came back with a quail that I thought I had not hit. So they bring back birds even when you don't think you get them.
Now, where did it start for you? As a boy, your family had short hairs?
Yes. My uncle was one of the early short hair aficionados in Arizona. He bought them there in the early 60s, and it came there from me. We got a puppy from him when I was young, and I just grew up with the breed. And, that was an interesting story because for years, Arizona quail had been considered unhuntable with pointing dogs. The old story was they ruined pointing dogs because they ran, and there was just a lot of bad-mouthing of them as game birds. And it wasn't until the German dogs got over that there really was a match made, that they really, I think, kind of clicked. And people began to see the Gambel's quail for what a great game bird it is. At least I hope they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that history of Arizona in terms of the context of bird dog use is really fascinating because our literature, our historical literature, it isn't like the East Coast where it goes back, a couple hundred years.
Right.
Arizona's a pretty brief span of time that we've been around. What statehood was in, we really didn't have much in the way of game bird interest early on that we're aware of that you find in the literature. But then there was that infusion of stuff that happened, and the way it was explained to me, and this was by an old Air Force guy. He said that many of the pilots during World War II were trained here in Arizona just because of the ideal weather. And a lot of those pilots, be they fighter or bomber pilots, after the conclusion of World War II, they stayed on as career officers, and they were introduced to German Shorthairs and German Wirehair Pointers and other breeds, Germanic breeds. And they brought those dogs back with them when they came to the States. And specifically, when they returned to the States, they went to those training areas in Arizona where they that had been established during World War II. And they were the original group of hunters that developed that interest. And I know you have followed that history. Talk to us about that. How did that work?
Well, like you said, a lot of the pilots went to serve time in Germany, either before the war or after the war. And a lot of German pilots came to train at Luke Air Force Base, too. So there was a good cadre of German pilots out there all the time. And they did. They brought over some of the German breeds. Interestingly enough, the first breed that I was aware of that was popular in Arizona, or made popular by the Luke pilots, was the Weimaraner. And there was a lot of hype about the Weimaraner in the early 1960s about the breed that could do it all, and just how amazing it was. And didn't quite live up to the hype, but Arizona hunters found that the continental dogs, the German-style dogs, were actually a better match for Gambel's quail because they weren't quite as fast and as far ranging, and they didn't tend to bust the Gambels into running the way they setters and pointers quite often did.
They could probably handle the heat a little bit better too, I would imagine.
Yeah. They had that advantage as well because they're short-haired dogs, and they did. And even though the Weimaraner wasn't quite the match that people thought it was at first, the Weimaraner led to the German Shorthair, which did seem to be a better match, I think, for a lot of hunters. And the German Shorthair became, for my money, I think, the standard breed for Gambel's quail, the way the pointer is for bobwhite quail, and the setter is for rough grouse. So it was a great match, and still is a great match to this day. Yeah.
And that NAVDA style of training, North American Versatile Hunting Dog Association style of training, which came from Germany, tends to be a fairly structured kind of process, start early on, but it works very well with the Germanic breeds. And you can really develop a pretty good bird dog. Not the classic sort of win a field trial kind of English pointer or setter, but a dog that produces birds, puts birds in the bag. Describe to us how you would start a young German Shorthair puppy.
Well, I like to start my puppies very early. And I start them first retrieving socks. I roll up a sock into a little ball and start them retrieving from the time they come home at 8 weeks, because they are natural retrievers. It's a good way of building that sort of relationship with your dog, and that spirit of cooperation is just throwing a little ball of socks for them in the hallway, letting them go get it and retrieve it back. And once they, get physically developed a little bit, they'll start pointing from early ages. So you can start your training on them very early. Now, I know I usually start with the wing on a string, and I know that you're not in favor of that. But the one thing about German Shorthairs is their instincts are so strong in the traditional breeds that it's I don't want to say it's hard to ruin one, but they're a little bit easier, I think, than some bird dog breeds are.
Yeah. Well, I've always been impressed, the Shorthairs that I've trained, is that they are very malleable. I mean, you get some of the breeds and they're oppositional in the way that they will react when you try and introduce some sort of structured training process. But a German Shorthair is just looking for someone to be in charge. And if you're a competent trainer and you're intentional about the way that you communicate with the dog, they just look at you like, what is it that you want me to do? And they do it. Unlike some other breeds. Yep.
I think that's a testament, to be honest, that goes back to those original German creators of the breed, because they definitely had in mind a particular type of dog that they were creating. And the fact that it's the most popular pointing dog in the world right now, I think shows that they did a really good job building that breed when they built it.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the sort of game that you hunt with? I know that you and I are bird hunters, but there are probably folks that would use their German Shorthairs more for big game or for other sorts of things. And that really kind of fascinates me, that's never having had that experience.
Well, it goes back to fundamental canine instincts, because, they're all descendants of wolves. And so they're all used to hunting fur naturally. And the things that they do naturally prove useful for us. I've always said that making a hunting dog of any type is really about putting manners on the dog, letting the dog do what it's bred to do, and building that kind of cooperation and partnership with the dog. And with the big game hunting, the Germans have taken it to a new level. They have a technique where they hook a strap of leather to the dog's collar, and they send the dog off on a blood trail to find the down game. And when the dog finds it, it grabs the leather. It's called the bring sole. And it grabs it and brings it back. And the hunter knows that if the dog's got that leather in his mouth, he's found the deer or the game, whatever it is.
Huh. Almost like picking up a dead bird and bringing it back.
Yep. But it also shows how smart. We don't give our dogs credit enough, I think, for the intelligence they have and how smart they are at things. I make no claim to be an expert on big game hunting with German Shorthairs, but having just seen it, it is kind of amazing what they can do in partnership with their hunters.
And how would you characterize them as water dogs? Are they effective with water work?
They are very effective with water work. Where they are not as effective as, say, a German wire hair, is sitting in the duck blind. I've never had a German Shorthair refuse to go break ice or go into cold water for a duck. They just seem to be happy to do it. But when they get back to the blind and they're sitting next to you and it's 40 degrees and there's no heat or anything, they start shivering. Mm-hmm. So they really do need a neoprene vest. But with the neoprene vest, I think they make very functional water dogs. I've always used mine for duck hunting.
Mm-hmm. You know, I try and get out once a week to shoot some pigeons for our two. We've got a German wirehair and a lab, and it's kind of a testament to that focus because, and I understand what you're saying. Shorthairs like to run more so than my wirehair. She will run and she'll cover ground, but she's an exceptionally good pickup dog just because she's very comfortable just sitting by me and waiting for something to fall. And our lab, on the other hand, he's, American lab, big, rambunctious, full of energy. He can take that position a couple, 3 minutes, and then he starts getting that wiggle and that twitch, and he's got to fall back 30 yards, and then he's behind me. He's on one side, then he's on the other side waiting. Okay, if he shoots a bird, where is it going to fall so I can be there first? And so he's back there trying to position himself for the inevitable arrival of a pigeon falling. And she sits right beside me, and she, with her eyes, she focuses on my gun and waits to hear a safety click. And we shot this morning. I think we killed 5 birds, and she got 4 of them. And he runs faster than she does. So it's kind of comical to watch.
Well, when the Germans developed the breed, they wanted 3 things out of it. They wanted it to be a good water dog, they wanted it to be a good upland dog, and they wanted it to be good on game tracking. So they were trying to create what they thought was the ultimate hunting dog for German hunters. And it took them 40 years or so, but arguably they did. They did exactly what they set out to do. And boy, they put those instincts into the breed. They really did.
And describe talk with us about how that development took place. When did they work on was it the turn of the century? Did they come along about the time that other breeds were being developed?
It was a little bit earlier. It was in the 1870s. Okay. And it came at a time of German reunification and nationalism. Germany used to be a bunch of little small duchies, and they united to create what we know as Germany today in the 1870s, and they united under the Prussian king. And when they did that, there was a strong spirit of nationalism, and at the time, the standard for excellence in the field trials in Europe were the British dogs and the French Brocks, and they pretty much outclassed everybody else. They had a lot of speed and style and flash, and the German pointer at the time was very much a hound, very much kind of slow, plodding, not a great nose. And so when they first tried to develop a German dog, they stuck with the old German pointer and tried to soup it up a little bit. And that didn't work. And so what they finally decided to do was form follows function. And they bred a bunch of different breeds together with the German pointer to get a new dog, essentially, a new dog. And they put in those French Brocks, they put in English pointers. The water work came from poodles, which were originally water dogs, as you know. And they created a pretty impressive mix of instincts. And that's become controversial nowadays, as you know, because you were describing how Americans love to tinker with things, and they've tinkered with the breeds by breeding them to English pointers to make them more impressive in the field, in field trials. But what Germans would argue is less effective as a hunting dog. So we deal with that today.
Yeah, and you do see just a very broad range, within, because if you get a German Shorthair puppy, you kind of need to know what you're getting, and you need to see mom and dad to be certain that you're getting that continental blood. And to be fair, there are some people that want to win field trials, and more power to them. Because I have had German Shorthairs in here for training that can run, and that can really run. So, but to my way of thinking, the dog that is going to produce the best day in and day out for the average gunner is that intentional, close to moderate range, good singles nose. A dog that is engaged as a partner with the gun as opposed to scanning the horizon looking for the next covey. I think that
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Yeah. And I actually have proof that you're correct. Because some years ago, I got into a big argument with some field trialers about whether field trial dogs were superior hunting dogs, which is what they claimed, and which they do, because their claim is that competition proves that they're better dogs, and you don't compete, how can you know? Well, I took my non-competitive dogs, my traditional style German Shorthair Billy, who you knew, Webb, and agreed to a grudge match to a day hunting Gambel's quail with a 9-time Hall of Fame champion, Blue Hills Rex out of New Mexico. And he came over, we went over just outside of Kirkland. And Billy found 5 coveys that day, and the field trial dog didn't find any. So it was, to me, I think that moderate pace, deliberate, singles dog, like you're describing, puts birds in the bag. When the other dogs don't, the other dogs run past them. Yeah.
That'd make a pretty good short story. You could, it's like that tennis grudge match that they had all those years ago.
Yeah. Well, I have put it out as a story, but there's too much bad blood, I think, between field trialers and hunters for it to be, I guess it's too controversial or whatever. Because as you know, this is still a sensitive topic in German Shorthair circles today. I'm sure you've had people claim that you don't know what you're talking about when you don't sing the praises of those field trial style Shorthairs. So,
it is. It's a different critter. They're bred to do a different thing, and if that's what a person wants to do, that is the way to go. If, on the other hand, you want to kill a lot of birds and have an enjoyable, relaxing day, often without the need for advanced electronics.
Exactly.
Boy, there's a lot to be said for the old blood German Shorthairs.
Well, and there's a lot to be said for them outside the hunting field as well, because they're good family dogs. Germans bred them to be family dogs. Those old German hunters didn't have room for a big kennel of dogs, so they wanted just one dog that could be the family pet and the guard dog and the hunting dog, and they did a good job. They're a dog that's good with children. They're very good inside dogs. Well, obviously I wrote a book about them. I can't sing their praises enough.
Right. I had an old blood Shorthair named Becky, And she would go to the International Sportsman Expos that we'd do when we were doing presentation work and training seminars and such inside the sporting dog ring. And then I'd have a booth, with set up, and I typically would have a male setter, and then I'd bring Becky along. And boy, she loved children, just loved children. And I'd put them up on the table, and, the kids would come by, and the wiggle would start, and it start at the bottom and go all the way up to the top until the ears were flopping. And particularly she loved children, babies with cookies or little ones with any kind of food smell on them. She was just their best friend. She'd start to drift down away from the booth, to wanting to follow her new friend.
Yep. They're not dummies. No, they are. And it's funny. I had a good friend of mine who had a similar experience that I do growing up with hunting dogs, but he grew up with Weimaraners, and I grew up with German Shorthairs. And he told me he got bit a lot, and I didn't. And I thought that was odd because I thought, the two breeds are so similar, but apparently Weimaraners can be a little cranky if you don't treat them right. They're a little kid, I guess.
Yeah, I don't see many Weimaraners. I just had a handful in for training. The Vizslas seem to be well represented. There's some very good Vizsla field blood out there, and I would see them not a lot, but fairly frequently. And I see Vizslas in aversion work, the current time.
Right.
The Weimaraners that I do see typically are very heavy. The breeding is gone. There's no one minding the store, so to speak. Which
not
is
for hunting dogs.
Yeah. And I think that's a good example because those German breeders, just like with wire hairs and short hairs today, if it's a condoned breeding, what you're getting because they watch that stuff. Those folks take care of those bloodlines.
Yes, they do. They do. They are quite serious about them. And they don't let just anybody breed willy-nilly. You have to prove you know what you're doing before they let you start breeding. And so that kind of brings you back to what you were saying. You can still get those German style breedings from German breeders, from the North American Deutsche Kursar Club. They actually keep those bloodlines separate from the American bloodlines because they're trying to keep those old style traits together. And a lot of those also in the NAVDA breedings. The NAVDA breedings emphasize more the German style characteristics than the American style characteristics.
Now there was a split. Isn't the current and forgive me because I don't follow those circles well, but the current AKC field trials for short hairs they're completely distinct from the NAVDA group and the Deutsch group. It's really a different entity.
Yes. The AKC field trials were the field trials developed for pointers and setters, English pointers and English setters. And they were not changed for the Germans. So the characteristics that won the English pointer trials and the English setter trials, which were a big run, classic points, high nose and high tail, all those things. Those are the traits that get rewarded in the AKC field trials. The NAVDA is not a trial, actually, it's a test along the German system. So the dog is expected to perform certain tasks and graded on how well it performs those tasks. And it's, very much along the traditional lines of retrieving and pointing and the old German style stuff.
Yeah. Dave, talk to us about your book. I know that it's an important reference guide for folks. Someone gets a short hair, wouldn't be a bad book for them to have. What do you cover in your book?
Well, we kind of go from A to Z, I guess. You start with the history of the breed. So we talk about the early history in Germany and how the breed was developed. We talk about the standards, the form of the breed. So the British standard and the American standard and the German standard, which are all slightly different. Because in the German Shorthair, at least to date, form still does follow function. It's still very much a functional breed, and there's not a huge gap between the show dogs and the field dogs the way there is in some other breeds. So you want your dog to be well put together, well structured. I talk about training your dog from the time it's a puppy, and picking a puppy, because as you pointed out, that can be a little tricky to get the kind of puppy you want. So how to do your research, and then training, and then just some hunting and some stories about German Shorthairs.
And I bet that it's been interesting talking with different Shorthair owners, because there's a certain commonality, once you've had a breed and you understand them well and you love that particular breed, to be able to see just how widely respected and how widely received German Shorthair pointers are. Because they really are kind of a standard.
They are, and it's really a thrill to be able to talk to hunters from different countries. So I've got friends, for example, from Sweden who hunt their German Shorthairs in Sweden, and then Germany, and then the United Kingdom, and then Australia and South Africa. So all of us all over the world are kind of joined by this love of this particular breed. And it's also amazing how good a job they do in completely different countries. Sweden, I wouldn't think a dog that does great in the Swedish forest would do great in South Africa, but they do.
In Sweden, they're hunting black game and capercaillie and
capercaillie and ptarmigan and grouse. Basically, the same sort of stuff that the British hunt, the red grouse, and those sorts of things. And they do some big game hunting as well, or for red deer and roebuck, the way the Germans do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Part of that, though, also is because I think, and you've made this point, I think, in one of your books, that they're actually a very intelligent breed. The Germans put brains into this breed, and that can be a problem at times for you, because they can be wicked smart. But it also makes them a very good problem-solving breed. I think they do.
Well, I know that in running a boarding kennel, where I'd see all different breeds and all different personalities come through, the German dogs were the ones I had to watch, because those rascals, they would open gates, they would unweave chain link fence.
Wow.
I had one a male dog come in, and I'd go to feed, and everybody would be in different runs, and he would lay flat on his side, and he'd stretch his arm under the wire and all the way over, and use his toes like fingers to try and grab that food bowl to flip it and get it was comical to watch. And I had to make a mental note every time. I had to make sure that food pan was all the way over, because this kid was on the job 24/7.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. Matter of fact, on one of my small dog trailer that I used for guiding, I had one run that was delegated for Shorthairs, because it had reinforced a metal window, because they had unraveled the expanded mesh metal. You know, they had torn it and bent it and broke it. Yes, setter never happened. You know, it just never happened. But you got to watch them German dogs.
Well, especially when they're bored. If they get bored, they're deadly.
Well, and that boarding would constitute being left behind, locked in one of the holes on a dog box while some English setter went out hunting. They didn't like that. Yeah.
They give them a chance to use that intellect, and they can use it in ways you definitely don't want them to.
Mm-hmm.
But they are. I mean, I think that spills over into training. They get things pretty quick, and when they get them, they get them. You know, they don't. Maybe they don't always want to do it for you, but they know what they're doing. And I think again that's accounted for a lot of their popularity around the world because they're so adaptable.
Yeah. Well, I've had some good short hairs over the years, and they are they're can be very dear. You know, very dear dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we shouldn't paint a too rosy a picture, though, because they can also be pains in the ass.
Well, yeah.
But one of the things the Germans put into them is a Teutonic toughness.
Mm-hmm.
And they are tough dogs. And especially the females, I found, if they don't like each other, they don't like each other. That's just it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts with it. So, you know, they do have their personality quirks, too, that's for sure.
Yeah, and short hairs, setters, they have a fight. There's a little bit of mussed hair. Short hairs have a fight. You're stapling someone back together.
Yeah, there's always blood. Yeah.
We had two short hairs here at the same time. It was Becky, the dog I mentioned earlier, and then a younger dog named Willow that had come in. Both of them older blood. And they took a flyer one afternoon. I had them loose, and I was working around the place, and they were kind of hanging around me. It's not like them to drift, but I'm going to bet that Becky took Willow for a walk. I'm going to bet that that's what happened. and I go to gather up, and there's we're two dogs shy of a load, and I go to look and nothing, and they're not here, and we're up on a ridge on a mountain range, and they had drifted off. And I looked, couldn't find them, and just a little after dark, I get a phone call, and it's one of the ranch properties down the hill, a ways, maybe over a mile, and this place was a former dude ranch. It was broken down, and it's the different houses were sold off, so it's still an entity, but each house has its own place. So the point being, it's kind of a wild track, and it's up against forests, but they have homes in there. And so I get this call, and it's a woman saying, hey, you missing a dog? I said, yeah, actually I am. And she said, well, we got a dog here. She said, we were just sitting down to dinner, and we heard a scratch at the door. And I said, really? And she said, yeah. And then, thought we were hearing things. They heard another scratch at the door, and went and opened the door, and Becky trots in, and, she, no hesitation at all. She's a friend of the world. She trots in, and she's there for dinner. Yeah. Take some water if you don't mind. And I had to laugh, So I told her I'll be right down, and I hop in the truck and I drive down there, and I asked if there was a second dog with her. She said, no, there's just the one. So it made me a little bit worried, and so I drive down, and I pull up, and there's Miss Becky. She opens the door. There's Becky, and then I look over, and there's Willow hiding in the tree line. She sent Becky in to prospect for food. Opened the door and gathered them up and brought them home. They can be real cards, just real cards.
Yeah, that is such a typical short hair story.
Yeah.
But we had, when I was growing up, we had a traditional short hair that was a wanderer.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't, we didn't know as much about the breed back then, and we didn't make a great fit with him. But one day he got out of the kennel, and this was in Prescott, and got a call from Dewey.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Wow.
That they had the dog, and that was, at least 8 miles, I guess, or 10 miles.
Mm-hmm.
He just decided to take a walkabout, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
well,
yeah.
They can be a fairly, they're self-sufficient. They can make it on their own, and they're fairly fearless dogs. I mean, they don't, some of the breeds can be a little bit clingy or apprehensive, but we're not a short hair. They're pretty bold.
But they are, but they're, again, range is kind of a function of that breeding.
Mm-hmm.
The traditional, my range on the traditional ones usually is from 100 to 300 yards to me.
Mm-hmm. That's
kind of a moderate range dog. When they're out in open country at 300 yards and they're working closer and 75 or 100 yards in the live oak, that's kind of a short hair range to me. But those field trial dogs, like you say, they can be out a half mile or more easily, in the blink of an eye.
Well, there was and actually I had a couple of those dogs here, and one was my dog, a puppy I'd taken in and to train out, and I was going to move her on to a friend in Kansas who was looking for a dog. Maybe 40 pounds.
Right.
Almost all white. A little bit of liver, but almost all white. A very small kind of, pointer-esque head. Small LU kind of look to her. LU being a famous breeding of English pointers. And I reined her in, but geez Louise. I mean, and she floated when she ran, and she could run. And so after I had that puppy time, I tried to, do a little bit of research, figure out where did this girl come from, and what was she? And the standard line. This was a breeder out of Phoenix who bred these dogs, and they, they were English pointers, what they were. With short tail, but the standard joke was that the way he culled his puppies was that at 6 months old he took them out and turned them loose in the desert, and whatever came back he kept. And that's a facetious telling, no doubt, but it's kind of true to form. This kid just drift on you, Often, like, I would see with LU pointers when they'd come in for training, that typically the thing I'd have to address at some point in that process was this desire to self-hunt. They didn't really need a gun around. They could just go on a lark all on their own, and, you could wait for them back at the truck. They'd be in 4 hours later when they got thirsty enough. So it was kind of an education for me. I got very careful about, someone offered me, hey, I got this, there's this 8-month-old female and she's not working out and we need to do something with her, or I saw her in a shelter, or she's in, some sort of bad situation. I'd look them over pretty close, and you could see it, that physicality. There's the continental breeds, the older blood has a very distinct physicality. Easy to see. They do.
They're very solid dogs.
Yeah.
They do. And it's a shame because it's actually split the breed. The original German Shorthairs that came over here were the traditional style ones, And then the field trialers decided they wanted to soup them up to meet their needs, and they started crossbreeding them with English pointers. And they split the breed, so they're at least two distinct types, I think, and arguably even more distinct types than that, but two basic types. And you got to be careful what you're getting, because if you want one and you get the other, you're not going to be happy.
Yeah.
So, well, like you said, I'm a big fan of the traditional style short hairs, and I've tried to keep true in my own breedings. And it's funny that you talked about Germans. The German breeders were very scientific about what they wanted in their dogs. And once they crossbred English Pointer into the breed to get the nose up and to give them a little bit of range, they didn't want any more English Pointer in there anymore. Mm-hmm. And their argument was that when you get English Pointer some more in there, you lose water work and you lose the big game aspects that they wanted. So their argument was that breeding English Pointers into them again was stepping backwards, was going the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And yet that's exactly what field trialers did here 20, 30 years ago. So I don't know, time's going to tell, but those American breedings have been they've gotten kind of a bad reputation. There's a lot of stuff said about American short hairs.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. It's such a different mindset, because when you look at the hunters here in this country, we follow that French model where the game, it belongs to the public, and it's open, and it's a pool of a resource that belongs to the entirety of the population. Where in places like England or on the continent, they tend to manage it more as a resource that is owned by a different farm or estate or whatever. And as a consequence, you and I, we want to go hunting, we go down to Walmart and buy a license. Someone in Germany wants to go hunting, they go to school. They get a 2-year degree. They're prepared. There's a certain prestige to that, and a certain maturity to it, and these are serious folks. You don't become a hunt master because you want to go, do a little bit of pheasant hunting. It's a vocation.
Yes.
And we see that in the dogs as well. I think that's probably a good way to look at a German Shorthair. This isn't a frivolous dog. This is a continental breed, German Shorthair. This is a serious dog.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's bred for very specific things, to be a hunting dog. And hunting encompassing, water work as well as retrieving and big game and upland birds. So it's got to be a very adaptable dog. And the Germans, even if you go today, their testing system for their dogs before they can be bred, that's very serious stuff. They take it very seriously. And if dogs don't pass the tests, they don't get bred. So they're serious about what they want in their dogs.
Yeah. And that really it's for the good of the dogs. And if you get a continental blood, you know what you're getting. I mean, there's a certain predictability to that genetic package that you're picking up.
There should be.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, we've made the point that German Shorthairs are individuals, and they can be clowns at times. So you can have a traditional German Shorthair that's a joker as well, and pulls your chain occasionally. Mm-hmm. That's they're serious, but they're not heart attack serious, I guess.
Well, we're kind of coming to the end of our hour, and it's been a pleasure just talking over Shorthairs with you. Dave, how can folks get your book? What do they need to do to?
It's available through Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com. They can Google my name, Dave Gowdey, or the title, The German Shorthair Pointer, A Hunter's Guide. And yeah, it's available through, they can order through bookstores as well.
All right. And so with that, Dave, thank you. Thank you for spending the time talking with us. And thank you out there for listening and being involved with the free range dog lifestyle. We do love to connect with folks, and please do, if you have an interest, hit that subscribe button. We could sure use the support. We are going to wish you well and hope that you and your dog have some fun today and get out and enjoy that free range dog lifestyle. This is Webb Parton signing off. Dave Gowdey, thank you, and we'll be visiting with you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Webb. All right, bye.
If you like this episode, I invite you to visit our website, freerangedogs.com. It's where you can find the stuff you need to live the free-range dog lifestyle. I want to help you with that. Book a consultation call or an in-person training, attend one of our ongoing events, or join our online membership program. We got it all on freerangedogs.com. All right, it's time to head back to the truck and the water bucket for the thirsty dogs. This is Webb Parton signing off, wishing you the boundless joy that comes when you share the outdoors with your best friend.